when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Jamison Williams has been so impressive these last couple of weeks. What's going on, draft fans? Welcome back to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I'm your host, Russell Brown, and that intro brought to you by yours truly. I'm super pumped about it. I've been saying it for a little while. I'm going to change this intro up, and I think I've got a beat, a cadence, things that kind of mesh pretty well. Plus, we got some audio mixed in there. Kind of went back to the original one I did from like 2-3 years ago and added some new stuff with me talking about Jamison Williams a little bit. So it is a happy day and a sad day, depending on who you are of a fan base. I know we've got a lot of Bills fans, and I know the season's over, but you can be happy because you'll hear a hell of a lot more from me on all of our Cover One podcasts that we have, because I'll be doing a lot of draft stuff for all of our podcasts, for all of our content that we have. But beyond that, the draft order is getting even more solidified, picks 25 through 28, and we're going to get into that today. Tomorrow or Wednesday, we'll get back into the Senior Bowl stuff. We'll do a defensive-heavy show, and then we'll do my favorite player at each position, and we'll create a 22-man roster before I get to Mobile, Alabama. I'll be there next Sunday with some colleagues. We're going to have some beverages. We're going to watch some conference championship football. And then beyond that, we get to practice next week. So it's going to be a lot of fun breaking those guys down, seeing what they do, seeing what they bring to the table. Maybe I'll get to meet Dan Campbell. We'll see how it all plays out. But the Buffalo Bills, we're going to get into this because last night was, to me, the best football game I've ever watched. And you can go ahead and argue with your mom, your cat, about what happened in 1984. I don't care. I don't care what happened in 1976, and I'm not taking that away from you, but I was not even a thought in those times. So I can't justify how good those games were. Maybe if I went back and watched those games, I could maybe have an opinion on that. But in my lifetime, last night was up there for me as number one. The Santonio Holmes catch for Pittsburgh when the Steelers beat the Cardinals in the end zone, that toe drag was phenomenal. The David Tyree catch is up there when the Giants beat the Pats, when Brady and the Pats were down 28-3 against Atlanta, and then obviously the Titans and the Rams, the 1-yard catch, I mean, it's pretty hard to top that. I mean, for me, that was one of my, not my earliest memory of football, but one of my earliest memories of football. One of the first like real Super Bowls I genuinely remember. And I was like 10 years old. And I remember, the Broncos and the Packers and stuff like that. I remember Brett Favre taking off his helmet and running down the field with it in his hand and all that stuff. Like, I remember a lot of different games from back in the day, but like that one really stuck out to me because of where I was, who I was with, and all that stuff. So that's my personal top 5. People are like, well, Russ, what about like Vince Young in Texas when they beat USC and all that? I'm talking NFL games. I'm not talking college. Meanwhile, I'm not going to add the Marshawn Lynch, the no Marshawn Lynch run, and they changed it to a pass play to Malcolm Butler. Sure, he made a great play, but it was a dumb play call. I'm not adding stupidity to this list. Last night was fun. Last night was battling and putting it all out on the table. And I could sit here and break down what I think went wrong in that game at times, other than just a coin flip, and maybe overtime rules need to be changed and justified to an extent. But Louis Riddick sent out a tweet last night about playing better defense, and I agree with him. You have to play better defense, and that's where we're going to start because we're doing a draft show today, picks 25 through 28. It's interesting because what does Green Bay and Tampa do with the quarterback situation? Tennessee, I know they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with the Ryan Tannehill contract, but do they potentially look at a replacement for him because he's not getting any younger, and let's be honest, he's not getting any better. So do they look at something there at 26? And then obviously with Buffalo, what direction do they go? It's not going to be a quarterback. We know it's Josh Allen. So that brings up the question, what direction do they go? And I'm going to be honest, starting here, I know a lot of people say, well, Russ, they need an edge rusher. They need to do different things there. And I'll agree with you to an extent. Jerry Hughes is going to be a free agent. Mario Addison's going to be a free agent. But this is why you double down last year, right? That's why all those years before you didn't take offensive linemen, because you didn't want to take them in the first and second round this past year, because you spent free agency money and you spent the draft and capital in bulking up the offensive line. So for the Bills, it makes sense to why you doubled down last year now, because you're going to lose 2 veterans potentially to free agency. Maybe they come back on a cheap 1 or 2 year deal, but it could also be unlikely. They might view it and say, no, I'm good. I'm checking out. I'm going somewhere else. They might retire. You don't know. But I have Bills fans in my DMs and in my mentions, and they're saying, well, Russ, I think the Bills should draft another defensive end. Well, my question is, you're not going to get Aiden Hutchinson. You're probably not getting Kayvon Thibodeau. You're not getting David Ojabo. Maybe he's there, and if he's there, I would say, okay, we can adjust the way we feel about that. George Karlaftis, maybe, but I doubt it. Those 4 guys have been talked about in the top 20 for months, all season. I don't see that changing. Whether things do or not, obviously it can happen. Things do change. But I have a hard time believing. Greg Russo fell because there was a lot of uncertainty of what Greg Russo was. Had a lot of versatility, could play in a lot of different spots, but he didn't play for an entire year. Teams were hesitant of that. The Bills were not. Meanwhile, Basham, he fell because, his body type's a little sloppy. He's a little all over the place. Meanwhile, again, one of those guys that I thought his motor ran hot and cold. I thought when he wanted to put it together, he could, but he also looked out of shape. So things will change, obviously. Things could change. But with that, it's not about your pass rush yesterday. It's about the fact that your secondary, and keep this in mind, people. I've been with Cover 1 for, this is like year 4 or year 5 now. I want to say 2018 was my first draft. So this will be my 4th draft with Cover 1. 4 years of covering the draft, but being consumed in Bills content every single day, all summer long, all fall, all football season, every single year. So I'm aware of what this team looks like and what the shape of the roster looks like and what the future potentially could hold. It's a bright future. But if you can't stop Patrick Mahomes and you really can't stop these receivers and tight ends from getting open, it's not about your pass rush at that point. Yeah, sure, the Bucs did it in the Super Bowl. But you stopped them weeks ago in the regular season, and then your defense went away from that completely. And I could sit here and say, the first possession of the second half, it's 4th and 1, and you have Josh Allen, and you punt the ball away to give it back to Patrick Mahomes. That, to me, is dumb. But I'm not going to sit here and break every play down. I'm going to give you my opinion on what it is. Because the last few years I've said, this team needs to find a complement to Trey White. It's unfortunate that Trey White got hurt. You hate to see that. I hate seeing that. But them neglecting this cornerback position in the draft is exactly what my franchise does, the Detroit Lions. They wasted good years of Darius Slay because they could not find an even pairing on the opposite side of the field. Sure, one side of the field is shut down, but it does you no good when everybody else is running routes to the other side. So that's where you need to focus on. It's not a pass rusher. If you want to start with pass rushers, Myjai Sanders out of Cincinnati would be a fine fit. He's thinner, but he's got good length. He's probably going to test really well. He's got some power behind him, and he can generate pressure. But I don't know if that's necessarily what's going to help you win next year, because you, again, are on the outside looking in, and I hate saying that. But you're on the outside looking in, and that's the truth. That's the cold, hard facts. So you have to find a way to not just generate pressures, but you have to find ways to create turnovers, and something in the back seven has to start changing. Because Levi Wallace is a free agent, and I'm sorry, Levi Wallace is not worthy of another contract with this team. You can get mad about that. You can go cry in your number 39 jersey all you want. I don't care. It's not good enough anymore. You want another edge rusher? I'll give you one. Penn State's Arnold Ebiketti. This dude, and I might have butchered that, but I'm just going to say this dude, if I'm taking an edge rusher in the first round, at the back end of the first round, this is the guy, because there's a lot of upside. But I don't know if he's going to be there, because teams like Philadelphia, they've got 3 first-round picks. They could use another edge rusher. If all the guys that I mentioned at the start of the show are gone, they might settle for this kid. And he's from, he went to Temple. He played at Penn State. This one makes sense. He's got great lower body flexibility. He's got great length. He's got, from an arm length perspective, he's listed at 6'3", 256. But I think when you look at like Melvin Ingram or Matthew Judon, he fits in one of those molds, and I think he can become that. So if that's what you're looking for to potentially replace Jerry Hughes, I understand that. That makes sense. But I just don't know if realistically he's going to be there at 25, because I feel like he could shoot up draft boards like crazy by the time we get to April. I watched his tape all weekend long. Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa, Auburn. Impressive. Very impressive. I was happy to write up his film report, and I was happy to write up that scouting report. So if you want to go in the edge rusher, I would go that direction. But realistically, I'm looking at corner. And if I'm looking at corner, I'm probably going to look at, for starters, if he's there, Ka'ir Elam out of Florida. He's got pretty good length. He's got the physicality that I desire in the run game. But meanwhile, I think from a press corner perspective, from a man coverage perspective, I think he does a pretty good job. And I think with his experience playing down in the SEC, I think that's a big plus. It's not like, and I'm not discrediting small school guys because they can play. But I mean, he played against some very good talent over his career. And I think he's been fairly solid over that career. So I would put Ka'ir Elam on that list because, again, I like his length. I like some of his patience. I like some of the fluidity that I see within his lower body. Again, he's not picture perfect. He's not clean. But if I could take an extra year on a guy, it would be a corner because I get that fifth-year option. Because corners are hard to strike in the draft. Bills got lucky with Trey White. Teams get lucky on corners in the first round. Sometimes they get lucky in the third round. But Ka'ir Elam, if he's there at 25, he makes a lot of sense. Beyond that, Andrew Booth Jr., Clemson, if he's there, I love what he brings. The ball skills are there. He breaks the football pretty well. Very fluid within his lower body. I like the way he's able to get in and out of his defensive back pedal. When he's in his back pedal and the way he kind of starts and stops and closes, I'm impressed with that. So I think Andrew Booth Jr. could be another one of those names. I'm not going to put Derek Stingley on this list because I think realistically, could he fall a little bit? Yes. I'm in agreement there. I said this on the podcast before. Sauce Gardner's my top cornerback. I don't see that changing. Could it change? Sure. But for me, it's not Derek Stingley. It's just not. So I think realistically, the two guys are there, and Elam and Booth. I think maybe there's an outside chance, and especially now that the season's over, they could potentially look at Roger McCreary from Auburn. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl. I think he's going to do really well. And it seems like the Bills value guys in the Senior Bowl and what they do. So the 6'1", 190-pound corner can really fit. I think anything that you're looking for him to do, I think he's willing in the tackling department in the run game. But meanwhile, I think he's somebody in that press man situation. He's got the speed to open and he can run with receivers and get in their hip pockets. I think he mirrors pretty well. And I just think from a ball skill perspective, I think he can get to the football and he can make the plays on the football. And I just said, you need to find somebody that can make plays. So those would be the three guys. I mean, they seem to be the most realistic options at 25. And then when you get into 57 and 89, I mean, if you can double down on corner, go for it. If not, maybe you do look at a wide receiver. And if you are looking for maybe that smaller wide receiver that can do something underneath, maybe you look at Calvin Austin out of Memphis, another Senior Bowl guy, but he would be a fun player. Probably wouldn't cost you an arm and a leg to grab because he's probably going to go in that second and third round range. When you put the ball in his hands, though, he's explosive. And maybe you need to find somebody on your offense that can match what maybe a Tyreek Hill can do to an extent. Calvin Austin might be able to do that. He's got that track speed. So that'll be an interesting fit. I think at some point in the fourth round, maybe the third round, you look at a guard. And if you want a late-round option at guard, Cordell Volson out of North Dakota State. I've talked about him a ton on this show in the past. I'll talk about him more as we lead up to the draft, but I think he's a right guard at the next level. I think he's got a nasty side to him, and he'd make a ton of sense for the Bills. So the point being is we'll at some point get into really deep detail of what the Bills draft plan is on the Cover One Buffalo show, even on this show. But at pick 25, as much as I love some of these edge rushers, I got to go with a corner if I'm the Buffalo Bills. So Bills fans, don't shoot the messenger. I'm giving you my opinion on it. That's just what I think, and I think realistically that makes a ton of sense for a team that can get torched through the air, and they've shown that. And I get it. I know who you're playing. You're playing Pat Mahomes. You're playing the Chiefs. Very creative, very innovative, but at the end of the day, you have to find ways to get better in that area. And I think that the cornerback position is the way to go. The next pick, the Tennessee Titans, the 26th pick. I thought they were going to lose the Bengals going into this all week long. I knew so many people that were taking like the Titans like -4.5, -5, and I'm like, I don't know what you're doing. I would not be taking that number. I'm taking the Bengals on the road. I don't care. For the Titans, it's pretty simple. They have to figure out what's going on with Ryan Tannehill. Is he the answer? Is he not? If he's not, do you look at potentially replacing him with a first-round quarterback, put a little pressure on him to perform better? Because, I mean, the guy's making like almost $40 million. But beyond that, like, is the quarterback that's going to fall to your lap, is it a Desmond Ridder? Is it Matt Corral? I mean, I think Matt Corral would be fun in this offense to an extent. A lot of RPO stuff that he did in college. But with Derrick Henry and some of those weapons, that would be fun. Plus Matt Corral, A.J. Brown. Hey, just speaking here. You know, two former college teammates teaming up and going over everything. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. But beyond Tennessee, potentially looking at, you know, quarterback or anything like that, I mean, I think realistically they could look at offensive line, right? I mean, Taylor Lewan's not getting any younger. They're not getting any younger up front, period. So is like Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa somebody that they look at? I mean, it's possible. Do they look at maybe another edge rusher? I mean, I know Bud Dupree is there, but Bud Dupree do a lot of money, and there's a lot of dead cap money there as well. So it's highly unlikely that they take him and move him. But, you know, they've got to figure out the Bud Dupree because there's a potential out after this season. There's the upcoming season, I'm sorry. There's Harold Landry. So there's a couple of different things that they could do. So we mentioned edge rusher with Buffalo, some of those names. I think Tennessee would be an interesting fit there, especially with their focus on defense. But again, offensive line, Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa, I like him at left tackle. They kind of took a player similar to him last year in Dylan Raduns out of North Dakota State. So I think he would be somebody as well that they hope to develop, and maybe you bring in Trevor Penning, maybe you get two guys that are similar and could really work well together. Later in the draft, though, I'm going to throw out a name that is, we mentioned offensive linemen. I think Luke Goedeke out of Central Michigan is going to go a lot sooner, and Tennessee doesn't have a second-round pick. They have the 90th overall pick in the third round. I think that's a pretty sweet spot for Luke Goedeke, probably rich for a lot of people, but he is truly one of the more technically sound players, I think, at the offensive tackle position when you get into the mid-rounds of this draft. I was watching his game against Missouri from this past year, and it's pretty clean for a MAC school guy against SEC talent. And I know Missouri's not a world beater like Alabama. It wasn't like he was lining up against Will Anderson or something like that. But it's just the technical points of his game, from always shooting his hand, staying square, moving well, and showing the athleticism in that tackle box is so important, and it's impressive. So Luke Goedeke is somebody else to keep tabs on if you're a Titans fan. Beyond that, I think they could definitely clean up their secondary a little bit, similar to the Bills as far as cornerback. I think Andrew Booth, Kare Elam would all be fine fits. Maybe in the later rounds, do they look at, Kobe Bryant out of Cincinnati? I think he's a fun corner that could get a little bit more love later on in the draft. Mario Goodrich out of Clemson, one of my favorite players in this draft, somebody that closes really well to the football, great tackler, just has some really good ball skills, somebody that could make some serious plays. So Mario Goodrich, Clemson could be a fun fit there at Tennessee as well. So them at 26, it's interesting, but they're solidified there on the board. Tampa Bay at 27. This one is a true wild card because, the Ndamukong Suh contract, I don't know exactly what that looks like currently because I'm afraid to pull up anything with all the advertisements that pop up on this. It happened to me a few minutes ago where I had to pretty much cancel the recording and kind of restart. So I'm afraid to pull that up, but Ndamukong Suh would be a fun he could potentially be a free agent, I believe. So if that's the case, could you look at a defensive tackle here like a Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia? Do you look at that interior to help with Vita Vea and everything else? Do you look at, another wide receiver? I know that sounds crazy with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but with some of the injuries that we've seen, and we saw what happened with this offense when Antonio Brown basically, quit on the team. Sure, the injuries piled up, but you lost some of that playmaking ability. Is there that guy at wide receiver there? Is it, a Treylon Burks or a Jahan Dotson, another Penn State guy with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans? Is that something worth looking into? Because I'm a big Tyler Johnson fan. I think he hasn't necessarily been given a fair amount of opportunities, but could you upgrade there? If you can, I think you could very well look at that and go, hey, we're going to go ahead and upgrade there. And I think if you can go with somebody like a Dotson, that would be phenomenal. And I'm intrigued with Tampa of what they do because ultimately it falls into one thing: Tom Brady. Is he retiring? Is he staying? Is he going? It's so hard to believe that he's retiring because it's Tom Brady. I mean, he just doesn't ever leave, right? He never goes away. So I have a hard time believing that he's going to walk away and he's going to retire. Could he? Sure. But time will tell on what happens there. And everything with the Buccaneers. I love their secondary. Not too worried there. You love the linebackers. There's a lot of pieces here, right? So there's a lot that they can do. But I think on the interior defensive line, you could get a little bit younger there, get some fresh faces. I think maybe you look at the interior offensive line. Again, at wide receiver, if Jahan Dotson is there, I'd be very tempted. Treylon Burks, another big receiver that's got some speed and size. I mean, his speed for his size is impressive. And other than that, I mean, you have to open the conversation to quarterback. But where are they with Kyle Trask? That's the other thing. I mean, Tom Brady, Kyle Trask, those guys been working together for the last season. Are they comfortable in Kyle Trask being potentially the quarterback of the future? And they're able to look somewhere else. And other than that, I mean, the O.J. Howard thing isn't necessarily it's not bad, but it's not great. I mean, it hasn't been what we all thought it was going to be. Gronkowski, again, if Brady leaves, you'd have to think Gronk is going to retire. So do they look at a Trey McBride at 27? Is that too rich for some fans? It could be, but I've said it before. I said it weeks ago. I think Trey McBride, if Brandon Pettigrew can go in the first round, why can't McBride out of Colorado State? So I think he's a miniature Travis Kelce. Potentially that upside is there. So if that's the case, why not? Roll the dice at 27. You're Tampa Bay. You're close enough. And if you can put enough weapons back on the field and it helps maybe a young quarterback like Kyle Trask, maybe, just maybe you go out and get Jimmy G. I don't know. We'll see how that plays out for Tampa Bay. They're interesting. Even more interesting, Green Bay at 28. What a debacle that was. I mean, you put up, 10 points in the first half. Not bad, and then you don't do anything in the second half. Just very surprising display from Aaron Rodgers and that offense. The Packers, I mean, what else can you really say but other than San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan having the number of the Packers and Matt LaFleur. Pick 28, though, hard to say what direction they go because they don't really take offensive linemen early. Could they look at getting a little bit younger? Sure. I've said that for a while, but they go opposite of that. I mean, is there a linebacker there that they could be really interested in? I thought some other linebackers played really well this year, given the circumstances. Chris Barnes, I thought, played pretty well. So could they look at a linebacker? Sure. I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, is Nakobe Dean there? Maybe. I doubt it, though. Devin Lloyd, same thing. I don't see those two players being there. But if the receivers and quarterbacks push some of these defensive talents down, especially at linebacker, it would make sense to grab one of them if you're the Packers. But again, it all circles around Devontae Adams. Is he gone? Is he staying? And Aaron Rodgers. Is he gone or is he staying? And obviously with that, I mean, does Devontae Adams go to a team like the Raiders? Does he go to a team like, does he go to a team like San Francisco? I mean, I don't know exactly what San Francisco's cap number looks like off the top of my head, but I know he's from that area. Would he want to go back home? You say the Raiders because, one, it looks sick with the black and silver, but also Derek Carr, former college teammates. Could that be something waiting in the wings? Could there be something in regards to going to the AFC? Would he want to go to a team like, I mean, it sounds crazy, but would a team like the Bills interest him enough to where he wants to be paired up with Stephon Diggs? Is that too rich? Maybe. Is it a team like, Seattle? Maybe it's enough to keep Russell Wilson around with Metcalf, Lockett, and Adams. Again, I don't know what his market's going to look like because he's going to demand very high dollar, but he's going to have a market probably from just about every team in the league. But the big question mark, like I said, Aaron Rodgers, does he stay? Does he go? If he leaves, is it to the AFC? Does a team like Tennessee, does a team like Denver make sense? I've already talked about Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill. Do they find a way to move him? If it's not that, I mean, I don't know where else it would be. It's not going to be, I would be shocked if it was like Houston. I would really be shocked if it was Washington. But crazier things have happened. Would it be potentially Miami? Would it be Tampa Bay where, Tom Brady walks away and Aaron Rodgers says, I'm out, I'm going to Tampa? I mean, you don't know with these guys. These guys and some of their egos, but beyond that, where they are within their current state within the franchise. And it wouldn't surprise me if Rodgers walked away. It wouldn't surprise me if he was back in Lambeau next fall. Wouldn't surprise me by any means. So, worst case scenario, I think you're looking at wide receiver or quarterback here. If you're not, I'm sorry, not quarterback, but you're looking at wide receiver here because I think they're going to give Jordan Love receivers in. I really do. I think they're going to give him a shot. I don't know if they're necessarily sold on him, but I think they're going to give him a shot. I don't know. I'm not sold on him. Sometimes I believe they're not sold on him just with the way Matt LaFleur kind of seems like responds to it. But at 28, I don't know if there's going to be a quarterback there. I mean, Kenny Pickett's going to be gone. Corral could be gone. Ritter could be gone. But at the same time, like, if you think you can win with Jordan Love, get 11, 12 wins with him, can you build this team up enough? So, worst case scenario, I think in reality, it's going to be a receiver. And it sucks because if Rodgers is gone and then you add a first-round receiver, that's all he's ever wanted. But I think you have to get better, especially if Adams leaves. So, again, I think Treylon Burks could be there. Jahan Dotson out of Penn State could be there. Maybe the wild card would be if one of the Ohio State guys are there. Is Chris Olave going to be there? I think he'd be a fun player there, and I think he would be really productive there, especially if Aaron Rodgers is there. Beyond that, I mean, where does Jamison Williams fall in this draft? Right when you talk receivers, where is he going to end up? I still think he's going to be a top 20 pick, but could he? I mean, you look at Philly with 3 first-round picks there from 15 to 19. Pittsburgh potentially, New Orleans. Could the Chargers just get a little bit fancy and throw something at Justin Herbert? Maybe. Baltimore, could they look at one? Absolutely. So, I mean, there's a couple of different options there. And again, he could go sooner. Teams like the Jets, Atlanta, highly doubt Denver, highly doubt Carolina, but maybe. But with that, I mean, Jamison Williams, I still think can be the first receiver off the board. And when you get to 21, 22, New England and Vegas, I just have a hard time believing they're going to pass on them, especially the Raiders. So that being said, Green Bay 28, truly a wild card because I thought they would be playing this coming weekend. I really did. And when you look at that roster top to bottom, outside of quarterback and receiver, there's not a true question mark. They've been able to plug and play and fill needs as they go, and they are so well coached and well versed that it works. It works. So the Packers could go in a variety of ways. A player I'm intrigued with defensively, outside of everything I listed, Trayvon Walker, Georgia. I mean, if this guy is there, he fits what they look for. They look for versatile guys that they can put in the middle, guys that can drop out into coverage. Him at his size, 6'5", 275, what he was able to do this past year, 6 sacks, 7.5 tackles for loss. I think he'd be a fine fit in that defense and kind of fits what they're looking for. They can do a variety of things with him. Makes sense. Packers, though, I'll be doing a lot of stuff probably, I'm sure, through the draft process with Pack-A-Day podcast with Andy Herman and his guys. And if not, I'm sure I'll talk about them quite a bit here on the show. I'll probably write up about them a little bit because they are intriguing. And especially if Aaron Rodgers and the Devontae Adams news hits that they're hitting the market, they're not coming back, or one's retiring and one's leaving, whatever, we're going to probably talk in detail about them a little bit more. So we'll see. But that being said, picks 25 through 28 are now set in stone. We've got Cincinnati in Kansas City in the AFC, the 49ers, and the Rams in the NFC. Keep in mind, the Rams and the Niners do not have first-round picks. Miami would actually have that 30th pick. Detroit would actually have that 31st pick of where it's projected right now off of record. So we'll be talking a little Dolphins and Lions potentially next week, and a little bit more as far as we go into the Senior Bowl. And we'll get into all that stuff. We'll look at more of these drafts and these mock drafts and these players and everything else right here on Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. So if you guys have not rated, reviewed, or subscribed to the show, I got to ask you why. You need to do so. It's free to do so. And at some point between now and within the next month, I'm going to pick a winner at random to get some free Cover One gear, a free Cover One subscription potentially, and a lot of cool stuff. So, that being said, I need you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. I think since this, we've gotten, since I think I first announced it 2 weeks ago, I think we've gotten about maybe 10 or 15 in there, maybe a little bit more. So, I think we need to get a couple more. So, keep it coming. Keep the reviews coming. We need those 5-star reviews. You guys, as always, can find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. And, of course, like I said, you can find the podcast on any streaming platform where you get your podcast, so be sure to do so. So it's been a lot of fun talking some of these players, talking draft. We're going to pick back up in another day or so. We're going to talk some Senior Bowl stuff, and we'll do some more Senior Bowl stuff before I get to Mobile, Alabama next week to cover the Senior Bowl. And we'll have player interviews next week and all that fun stuff. So it's going to be a great week next week in Mobile. Be sure, again, to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. So everybody take care. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time here on Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.